So welcome, good morning, happy Wednesday. My name is Coach Brooke, and I wanted to invite you all, welcome you all, and get started with the first installment of our sleep webinar series. So we are going to be going through a series of sleep webinars. This is the first installment in that series. And they'll be taking place one each month. So over the next 6 months, we'll be kind of delving into some topics surrounding sleep and, taking it sort of deeper each time into a different topic. So for today's topic of the webinar, we are going over sleep routine. Now, for this first one, what we're kind of trying to do here is just give you a general overview and some tactics and tips that you can put into play right away. So as you learn and go through these webinars and get more and more details and information, these are tactics that you can work on throughout that entire series. So we're given to you straight up front, right away in the beginning, so that you guys can put some of these to use, try them out and kind of see how they work for your sleep and for your life. And, then as we move on and we learn a bit more, possibly adjusting those or seeing what works for you and what doesn't. So I invite you to try these out today, just a very broad overview, and then we're going to dig deeper in each separate one. All right, so digging into our sleep routine, just starting off with a basic purpose of sleep. I've got a nice quote on here by Matthew Walker, PhD, the sleep expert, taught at California, Berkeley. And he says, sleep is the single most effective thing we can do to reset our brain and body health each day. And I find that so fascinating and just so impactful because, we constantly are thinking of things of, eating healthy and exercising, which, don't get me wrong, I'm never going to stop preaching those. That is what we are all about here, is the exercise. But I think that it's so important that, our society has kind of forced us to put sleep on the back burner. And, we really do need that sleep. It's so essential, not only for physical recovery, but for our mental, emotional, cognitive recovery as well. So, the benefits that we see from sleep are immense. Like I mentioned, we talk about, a lot of us here, if you join our classes, if you're exercising regularly, hitting the gym, you need that physical recovery, okay? You can feel it in your body when you're not getting enough sleep. But then we move on to the mental and cognitive performance of it, staying focused at work each day. We're using those skills every single day in our jobs and in our daily lives. And so we need that sleep to help us recover and perform at our best. It helps stave off sickness and disease, helps with weight balance, and also helps with our emotional state, right? So our mood. You're noticing you're a little bit more, maybe cranky during the day, or little things maybe kind of set you off. It may be because you haven't had enough sleep, or maybe you notice that in some of your coworkers, your family kind of, I'm sure we've all experienced that, getting snapped at, where it's like, whoa, what's the deal? That could be to blame, is that lack of sleep or insufficient sleep. And then, noting that our sleep follows an internal clock that runs on an approximately 24-hour rhythm. So it's not exactly 24 hours, but this is called our circadian rhythm. And Coach Evan is going to discuss this a little more in depth on our next webinar. We also have the stages during sleep. So I'm sure you guys have all heard the terms REM sleep and non-REM sleep, and what goes on during those. Evan's really going to dive into that next time. So if you're interested in, how exactly those different stages and that rhythm affects us, definitely tune in next month for Evans. But just to give you guys an overview, that's kind of how it flows. So on our next slide here, we're talking about how much sleep we actually need. Okay, and this table that I got here came from the Sleep Foundation. And I didn't include infants in this table, or babies, but just to give you guys, just to shout it out, they need a lot. So it changes depending on the stage that they're in for that infant, but let's just leave it at that. They need a ton of sleep. But if you're looking at children ages 6 to 13, they need about 9 to 11 hours. Teens, looking at about 8 to 10 hours. And I would guess most of us on this webinar today are adults or older adults between 26 and 150 years old. We need about 7 to 8 or 9 hours of sleep, okay? And, it does vary from person to person. This is one thing to note too. We tend to see children or teens kind of, especially in teens, maybe like sleeping in later in the day. That circadian rhythm that we talked about does shift throughout your lifetime. So it's not always the exact same waking and sleeping time. It does shift slightly. And so when we see, school start times and possibly teens sleeping later into the day and wanting to stay up later at night, that's not always totally just a phase, right? It does have to do with our internal clock a bit. So just something to note. And again, we'll get into a lot more of that later. So, all right. So we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of it, guys. Setting a routine. So the biggest thing that I can stress here is consistency. Consistency is key. Okay, so trying to wake up and go to bed at the same time each day is really going to help set that rhythm for you. And it's really going to help your body recognize when it's time to be awake and when it is time to sleep. So we think about, trying to catch up on sleep on the weekends. Maybe we've been too busy during the week, or, vice versa. You stay out late on the weekends for socializing, things like that. There really is no such thing as catching up on that sleep. And so, trying to log a few extra hours the next couple days, it doesn't make up for any amount of sleep that you've necessarily already lost. So it's just super important to note that consistency and timing is very crucial for us. And, trying to follow that same routine every day, it just signals your brain as to, when to start slowing down, when to be getting ready for bed. So looking at setting up your space, this is a huge one, and I don't necessarily follow this right now while we're working from home, but trying to use your bedroom just for sleep really signals the brain that that is the place to calm your brain down. So especially during these times, this pandemic, if you're working from home a lot more, if you're somebody who's working in your room, that is not always the best tactic for sleep if you have trouble sleeping. So we want to train the brain that the bedroom, your bed, that is a place for sleep, not for work. Okay. So best to kind of try and find a different spot for that, although I know it can be challenging. We also want to set ourselves up for comfort. So having a comfortable mattress, pillows, and blankets that suit you. And again, we'll go into this in a future webinar that has to deal with pain during sleep, but organizing those pillows and getting the correct pillows in the correct spots to help your spine stay neutral is going to be really important. Sometimes we kind of get cranked into a weird position, or especially if you sleep perhaps on your belly, your neck is turned, your back is arched. Not always the best for that pain relief. And that is another topic we'll delve into in our future webinars. Best not to have TVs in the bedroom. Again, this is not one that I personally follow, so I totally feel you if you're like, what? I like to watch a show before I go to bed. But that light that is, and the sound that is emitting from the TV doesn't necessarily signal our bodies for sleep. So it's best to kind of stay away from those screens. Setting the temperature to a comfortable level. So recommended between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit. This can vary based on the person, whether I know some of us kind of run warm or run cold, but that's the general recommendation. And then dimming the lights. You want to get as dark in there as possible. So especially if you've got some sort of like street lamp outside your window that's kind of poking in, that's something to think about. So then looking at the right side, there are routine tweaks. Okay, so setting up this routine, and what you want to think about is that the routine is really starting, if you think about the end of your day when you get to go to bed, and working backwards, right? I'm not talking about just a routine, okay, get ready for bed, lay down, play some calm music. I'm talking about this routine begins at the very start of your day. So it follows that full circadian rhythm. So viewing the sun rising each day. This is a really great tip that I got from Exos's Chris Bertram, and he is an expert on this topic. He's Dr. Chris Bertram. He's really great. And he had mentioned that the light from the sun rising gives a signal to our brains to help us start waking up for that day. And it really sets that circadian rhythm into its path for the day, right? So that can be really important and something that maybe, we don't necessarily think about all the time if we're indoors. Exercising during the day. This is a huge one, and one I personally am super committed to. We got to get the exercise in during the day. Morning time workout, or while it's nice and sunny out, that's a great time to do it. Get that heart rate pumping, get the blood moving, and sort of gets the system on a nice routine. Setting your dinner time or your meal time. So I know this one can be difficult, especially if we've got kids or, spouses, people you're trying to set things up with. It can be difficult with activities, but really trying to cement in that time we all come together for a meal at the end of the day is important. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the timing of that dinner is also going to be fairly important. A warm shower before bed can be helpful. And the reason for that is that as we sleep, our body temperature is dropping, right? And so taking that warm shower can help the internal temperature lower ahead of time. So kind of prepping and priming yourself before you get into bed for that sleep. Preparing your clothes, whatever you need for work the next day, making sure it's ready and out to go. Dimming the lights a couple hours before bedtime. So again, because we spend so much time indoors, we've got these blaring lights, artificial light going on all the time. Dimming those down a couple hours before bed, getting your brain prepared is going to be a great tactic. I know we're probably not going to like to hear this one, but putting the phone down before bed, or if you definitely can't put the phone down or the computer down or the iPad, changing that to a warmer lighting, okay? Something that's not going to be so blaring on your eyes. And something we talk about is that a lot of the research has said, this blue light is really disrupting our sleep. And there's more research out that really points to any sort of artificial light. So we really want to try as much as we can to kind of avoid that. Reading or sleep sounds can definitely help sort of calm the system down, get rid of that stress response. Guided breathing. This is one that we offer. So if you're interested in something like meditation and guided breathing, check out one of our classes. But there's different breathing routines that you can do that specifically help calm that sympathetic nervous system, right? Yeah. And then, of course, viewing the sunset. So just the same thing as we said with the sun rising, viewing that sunset and the different colors that are reflected in that helps to calm the body down, signals the brain, all right, my rhythm is coming to that sleep point. All right, so that was quite a few tips there, pretty big slide. So we're going to move on here to what happens if we don't do that. Now, this is apart from your sleep routine, right? Like we can go two ways with this. What happens if we don't have a sleep routine? Well, a number of things can happen, right? You don't have a routine, but you still tend to sleep well. Okay, maybe you have an internal routine that's kind of working for you already. You've got great sleep. Maybe you don't have anything to worry about it. So not necessarily having a sleep routine, I can't say that is going to necessarily harm anyone. However, moving away from that routine, what happens if we don't get enough sleep? And that is where it is linked to a lot of problems and negative health effects. And so you'll see some of these here under consequences. And it's going to be important to note that insufficient sleep has been linked to these things, right? I'm not here to say that this is causal. One causes the other and vice versa. I'm just saying that a lot of these are linked. And so it's just something to think about. If you're somebody who doesn't sleep well, doesn't get the recommended amount of sleep, it really can have some negative health effects. We're looking at a risk for certain forms of cancer, Alzheimer's disease. And this is one, that there's a lot of research around that they're developing, that they're still working on, and how the brain works and sleep's sort of connection with memory and how that works, right? Blood sugar levels, we've got stroke, heart attack, weight gain, which this is going to be a really cool one in our third installment of this series. Coach Triana is going to be talking about sleep and how it relates to our digestion and our nutrition, and how those two kind of play back and forth. It's going to be really interesting. So if you're interested in that one. And then, of course, physical and other mental disorders. All right, so we've got through that. We've kind of got the gist. So, all right, how can we make or break our sleep? What are these healthy habits we need to do or not do, right? Again, this is going to be different for everyone. These are just some kind of really great tips that we can get to right away. So you're going to want to avoid overeating or eating too close to bedtime. So I'd mentioned earlier having a set dinner time. And again, Triana's going to go deeper into this when we get to that nutrition. But just to start with, you're going to want to avoid having a meal too close to bedtime or eating too much too close to bedtime. Okay, a small snack is probably going to be fine. But when you look at the digestion that's happening, without you knowing it, if you're digesting all that food or a really huge meal, it's really going to disrupt your sleep. A lot of times without you probably knowing it. Alcohol and tobacco, best to avoid, most of the time. Caffeine too close to bedtime. And this is a really interesting one too that we'll speak more on in nutrition. But caffeine, if we're looking at that, has a half-life of about 4 to 6 hours. And it's interesting because everybody's got sort of a different sensitivity to caffeine. So this can vary, so for some, it's going to be a little bit closer to maybe 7 hours, a little bit longer. But when you're looking at that, it's a little too simplistic to say, don't drink caffeine or eat caffeine or ingest caffeine X amount of hours before bedtime or, after X time PM, right? You're going to want to look at what your bedtime is, what your routine is that you've established, and probably count backwards of that half-life. And, that caffeine can really, again, it's one of those things where we sort of build up a tolerance to it. And so without realizing it, that caffeine can be disrupting our sleep and, altering that kind of without us knowing it. If you're somebody who has quite a bit of caffeine, you drink it later in the day, that can sort of be affecting you, maybe waking you up, making you restless without you really realizing it. And so just something to pay some closer attention to. Vigorous exercise close to bedtime. Again, this is an interesting one. When we're doing that vigorous exercise, really getting the heart rate up, the blood pumping, that's going to release endorphins, and it's really going to pump our system up, giving us more energy, right? And so if the only time you can exercise is in the evening closer to bedtime, you may want to look at more of a calming exercise. So going for a walk outdoors or some sort of yoga, some sort of, mobility, stretching type movements will be nicer and a little bit easier for sleep, and pushing that moderate or vigorous exercise earlier up in the day, okay? Because as we've seen in a previous slide, it's important for sleep, but when it's too close to bedtime, it might end up keeping us awake a little longer than we'd like to. And then, of course, we're coming back to it with the screens again, right? Over and over again, try to avoid the screens close to bedtime. All right, now some tips for if you're having trouble for sleep. Tea is a great one, warm tea. I will say you got to be careful because as we were talking about caffeine, a lot of different teas do have caffeine in them. Green tea is going to have a small amount of caffeine. If you've got black tea, English breakfast tea, things like that, those are all going to have caffeine. And so you're going to want to try something more herbal. Chamomile is really nice. It has that sort of calming effect. Lavender is a really great one. And whether you diffuse it into the air, have lavender smells, or possibly lavender oils in a bath could be really nice. That has a more calming effect on the body. Hydration is going to be a good one as well. So making sure you're hydrated before bed, but not drinking too much. So as we age, our bladders lose strength, and we might notice ourselves getting up in the middle of the night to have to use the restroom. And so, of course, we want to get enough fluids during the day, especially water, but trying to drink those a little earlier in the day and then, tapering off towards the end of the day so we don't have to get up in the middle of the night to use the restroom might be helpful. A sound machine, a fan, apps for white noise, that sort of background noise that's going to be more droning can help put us to sleep. Guided breathing or meditation, like I mentioned. Quick plug, we offer these. So if you're somebody who's new to it, definitely check it out. And some of that slower breathing can really calm your system down. It actually lowers your heart rate, gets you ready for sleep. Writing down your schedule. Now, this is a big one if you're somebody who has stress or anxiety about work. And we actually talked about this on our Live Well podcast, is a lot of us, we're thinking about all that we have to do the next day, cannot turn the brain off. Writing these things down on a to-do list or on your schedule can be really helpful. You get it sort of out of your brain onto paper, or onto your notes or your app or whatever it may be, can really help us to let go of that for now and then calm down try to sort of empty the brain of those stresses and anxieties. And then a sleep mask or blackout curtains is going to be important. And again, you'll want to make sure, even if you do have like a fan or an AC heater in your room, those little lights, or even on your computers, if they're off, the blinking little lights, even something as small as that can disrupt your sleep. So make sure to try and cover those up, or maybe wear a sleep mask. I always put like hats over my heater. So they look dressed up, but they're just really trying to cover up those lights. All right, so that is our overview for today, everyone. And these are just some resources that I used in order to research this presentation. And Citi actually also, through their benefits, plugs the Sleepio app. So if you're looking for an app to sort of help you track your sleep and maybe give you a score of how well you're actually sleeping, that's definitely one to check out. Our next webinar series will be June 16th at 10 a.m. and that's going to be with Coach Evan. And like I mentioned, he's going to be talking about those sleep cycles. So your circadian rhythm, your REM versus non-REM sleep, sort of the hormones coming into play there, what's all going on with that. I encourage you to scan this QR code on the screen and submit your questions there, because we're going to be hosting a podcast on our Live Well podcast that will answer those little bit deeper questions from Dr. Chris Bertram. He's going to be helping out, and then some of our Exos staff they are experts on this topic, are going to be helping us answer some of those questions that maybe, myself and my staff don't quite have for you. So feel free to follow us on any of our social medias. Okay, that Spotify one that you see pop up is where we're going to be posting all of your questions and the answers to those. So definitely give it a listen once that comes out. Thank you all so much for joining. Have a fabulous rest of your day, and we hope to see you next month.